Alright, so does the Dell come with crapware? The answer is kind of. In looking at this list here, I don't want the Google desktop, I don't want the Google toolbar, I don't want GoToAssist, I don't want McAfee Security Center, and I don't want Microsoft Works or Roxio Creator DE. Now, the Google stuff, I would consider that to be crapware because that's, Dell is essentially making a couple bucks off of Google by having their software on here, including Microsoft Works, to give the users basic word processing, I think is good. Roxio Creator DE, letting them burn CDs and DVDs. Although it's worth noting that with Windows Vista, Home Premium, you have the ability to burn DVDs and to do a lot of the stuff that Roxio Creator already does. So I think it's probably unnecessary. But there are no, trial versions of QuickTime or, sorry, I meant Quicken, or there's lots of other things that Dell has bundled on their computers in the past. So to not have, a scroll bar for the programs is actually, I think, a pretty good step in the right direction. But I'm going to go ahead and uninstall some of this software and sort of clean it up a little bit. Alright, for this segment I wanted to show you how the optical drive works. There was a few questions from people who were wondering about whether or not this even came with an optical drive, because when you look at the front, you don't see the typical eject button. So here is a blank DVD. It's a slot loading drive, so all you do is you just simply put it inside the slot here and give it a little push, and the machine will accept the optical disc. And there is a light actually that comes on here. I'll see if my camera can focus in. It's pretty small. There we go. So this is actually the eject button here. So if I tap this, so this is a touch sensitive display here. So I tap it and then the optical drive will pop out. Now another thing worth noting is that the hybrid logo on the bottom here is in, it's laid out horizontally. So I was curious, what would happen, because this unit is designed to be used horizontally, or rather vertically, or horizontally. So I was wondering what would happen if you decided to use it in a horizontal mode. Would this thing actually, change? It's smart enough to do that. So let me pause this video and I'll show you exactly how that part works. Alright, so here is the Hybrid Studio desktop. And I'm going to just punch the power button here, and you're going to see that the logo actually, when it's in horizontal mode, the horizontal logo actually comes up here. Well, technically it would be vertical if it was facing this way, but as you can see, the desktop computer, is smart enough to actually, light up the proper logo. And this eject button here for the optical drive, it also lights up in the correct orientation. So there are actually multiple logos and icons back here on this panel, and depending on the orientation of the computer itself, it will light up the proper one and darken the one that isn't supposed to be used. So not really a big feat of technology, but it's a nice added touch that I think it speaks to a certain level of refinement that a lot of other Dell products in the past, really haven't had. So I think it's great that Dell has made the extra step to just give their system a little bit more refinement. One of the big questions with any desktop computer is, how loud is it? A few people were asking about how loud the fan speed is on the Dell Hybrid, especially since I was going to be using it in a home theater environment. You want to make sure that the computer is quite quiet. So the fan itself is exceptionally quiet. In fact, I would say that on average the fan is quieter than any laptop I've ever had. Right now the microphone is about 16 inches away from the fan, and it is really not audible, or just barely audible. If I stress out the CPU here, so I'm going to run 2 instances of CPU burn-in, which is going to peg the CPU at 100%. The CPU fan does get slightly louder. I'll stop talking here for a second. You might be able to hear it. But even when the CPU is under a lot of stress, the fan is still very, very quiet. I ran CPU burn-in 2 instances, actually 3 instances of it, for several hours to check on the heat output of the Dell, because there were some people who were concerned that this unit would get really, really hot, and frankly, the sides of it and the top of it were quite cool. They were just barely warm. So Dell has done a really good job with the thermal output on this unit. The fan, like I said, is quite quiet. The DVD, actually, that's the other thing I should mention. There's a few people that were wondering about the DVD player itself. When I put a DVD in here, and I can actually do that right now, and when it starts spinning the DVD, you know, with a lot of devices like the Xbox 360 and I imagine the PS3 as well, when it spins up a DVD, it can actually get quite loud and which can be of course really irritating. So I'm just going to be quiet here for 1 second so you can listen. So that is as loud as the DVD gets. I tried it with, you know, blank DVDs and CDs. I tried it with a couple of movie DVDs, and it is essentially inaudible. I could not hear it, and that's from, you know, about 2 feet away. And of course, when you're in a home theater environment, you're not going to be sitting 2 feet away. You're going to be, you know, 10 feet away. I can hear my Xbox 360 spinning a disc from about 10 feet away, but I cannot hear this computer. So Dell did a really, really, really excellent job in terms of making this unit as quiet as possible, both from a fan point of view and then also from a spinning optical disc point of view. In fact, the loudest thing about using an optical disc is ejecting it, is the honest truth. It makes a little bit of noise when it ejects, and it makes a little bit of noise when you put it back in. But other than that, it's really quiet. So, good job, Dell. Alright, just a couple quick words about power consumption. So, I did a bit of testing with the Kilowatt, which is a device that allows me to measure the amount of power draw that the CPU or the overall computer is making against an electrical socket. The unit, this particular version that I have, uses up about 23 watts when it's turned on and just idling, you know, so it's not really doing anything intensive. If I push one of the CPU cores up to 100% CPU usage, it goes from 23 watts up to 41 watts. And if I hit the second CPU core and max that out, it goes from 41 up to about 46 watts. So this is a very, very, you know, power efficient system compared to the average desktop computer, you know, that has maybe a 500 watt power supply. It doesn't use up that much at peak, of course, but this unit, I would say, is, I'm just guessing, but it probably would be at least 2 to 3 times more efficient in terms of power usage, or less power hungry rather than your average desktop computer. I also wanted to point out that this Ethernet port here is actually gigabit, so this is a little bit different. There's lots of Dell systems that, you know, still ship with 100 megabit, especially laptops. Laptops are notorious, you know, for having 100 megabit Ethernet. So if you want to have gigabit Ethernet, this is also a good device to choose. Now let's move on to our next segment.